The suffrage movement was filled with a broad range of diverse people. They were united by a dedication to a cause of expanded rights for women, including the right to vote, but there was a lot they didn't have in common. Suffragists varied in methodology, skin color, religion, ethnicity, gender, and acceptance or rejection of traditional gender roles and social expectations. It is no surprise that some did not live typical heteronormative lives. In other words, they did not fall in line with the old Victorian ideals of women being subservient to a husband, raising children, and dressing in long skirts. Here you see what one might call a traditional woman. Large flowing dress, perfect posture, seated in her chair, not a curl out of place, looking quiet and serene. Since the 1800s and early 1900s did not yet have the LGBTQIA vocabulary or identifiers that we have today, suffragists could not claim those words as part of their identities. But their lives show us their bravery in living non-traditional lives, even for those who weren't ready or able to share those parts of themselves openly. At the dawn of women's suffrage in the United States, women were largely confined to very traditional roles of wife, mother, and caretaker of the household. Throughout the suffrage movement, cartoons and postcards used images of men in traditionally feminine roles to vilify women and mock the fight for women's rights. Here you see a cartoon of a stern-looking woman leaving her untidy home to go vote while her distraught husband sits wearing an apron, holding two crying babies. Women were supposed to marry and have children. Images of men in women's roles as housekeeper or parent were seen as reflective of the absurdity that would come if women had equal rights. The image of men wearing dresses or nightgowns and caring for children and home used reversal of traditional gender norms to mock the movement by feminizing men or masculating women, both of which were unacceptable to the majority of early American society. Women who demonstrated behavior or appearance outside of the socially constructed norms were labeled mannish women or abnormal. Much can be inferred when looking at historical women and their relationships, but this must be done with caution. Women, especially those who pursued activism, tended to seek out long-term living situations with other women. Here you see an image of two women who comfortably share a home together. This could have been associated with identity or sexual orientation, or it could have been the result of their rejection of heteronormative culture. It could be men weren't comfortable around them, or they weren't comfortable around men and sought companionship with other women, be it social, emotional, or romantic. In the late 19th century, these relationships became known as Boston marriages. Either platonic or romantic, the term Boston marriage, named after the geography it was most commonly accepted, was used to describe women who lived together without the financial support of a man. This was largely considered acceptable until the late 1920s, when it became less common as women worked to avoid situations that would result in suspicion of them engaging in homosexual relationships. Whether the result of sexual orientation, defiance of social expectation, or instead choosing to dedicate their lives to a cause so much larger than themselves, some chose to never marry. Others took a different approach, like Amelia Bloomer, known for creating the Bloomer costume, shown here with a woman wearing loose pants under a shorter skirt. Some rejected traditional women's dress, spearheading a revolution in dress reform, creating a space for those who could not find themselves buried in layers of skirts. Just like it is inappropriate to force labels or identities on people today, we must be mindful that many terms we use today did not exist in the 1800s and early 1900s. Some people have referred to Susan B. Anthony, Carrie Chapman Catt, or Alice Paul as lesbian, bisexual, and asexual. However, lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, transgender These are not terms that existed within their lifetimes, so they could not identify themselves as such. This is not to say this isn't how these individuals might have identified if they were alive today and had access to today's language and today's meanings. But the truth is, we don't know. Regardless of how someone lived or what modern definition they seem to fall within, we should strive to reflect the historical reality for all our ancestors. Suffragist Molly Doosan had a public relationship with Polly Porter, shown here sitting on their front porch in a photo courtesy of the Porter Doosan Collection, Castine Historical Society, Maine. The couple lived on a farm in Massachusetts where they kept bulls named after men they didn't like. It was clear that every decision Molly made was influenced by how it would impact her relationship. When Molly wrote letters of congratulations to fellow suffragists after the ratification of the 19th Amendment, she referred to partner and I, normalizing her relationship for those within her circle. After the death of her second husband, Carrie Chapman Catt, shown here taking a phone call, settled down with Mary Garrett Hay, who she asked to be buried beside instead of either of her husbands who predeceased her. Catt and Hay were together almost 40 years and now lie together in Woodlawn Cemetery in New York. This is a photo of their headstone, which reduces the intensity of their relationship, reading, "Here lie two, united in friendship for 38 years, through constant service to a great cause." This headstone was arranged by Alda Wilson, the woman who lived with Catt after Hay's passing. Dr. Anna Howard Shaw, shown here sitting at her typewriter, had a relationship with Susan B. Anthony's niece, Lucy Anthony, for many decades. Susan B. Anthony expressed concern not over the same-sex relationship, but over their 12-year age difference. Shaw and Lucy Anthony were together over 30 years, and Shaw left the entirety of her estate to Lucy upon her passing. Early in Shaw's career, she sported short hair and men's clothing, but adopted a more stereotyped feminine look when she started to draw media attention through her suffrage work, so her appearance would not offend mainstream society, whose support she wanted for the suffrage movement. Fellow New York suffragist Annie Tinker, in a photo from Schlesinger Library, wearing a sport coat and bow tie, continued to portray a more masculine appearance and was reprimanded in the media as a result. Susan B. Anthony, shown here, seated and wearing a traditional dress, never married, and had close relationships with Anna Dickinson and Emily Gross, both of whom she referred to as lovers. Though the term is generally used differently in present day, and then was not necessarily an indicator of a sexual relationship. Lucy Stone's daughter, Alice Stone Blackwell, shown sitting at her desk holding a woman's journal, had a many years-long relationship with Kitty Barr and made no secret of them having romantic love. Blackwell refused to adopt the label of invert or sexual invert, the terms at the time used to describe homosexuality. Frances Willard, shown here in glasses and traditional dress, embraced doing household tasks that were often referred to as men's work. In Willard's younger years were full of rebellion against feminine clothing. Willard's multiple romantic female partners referred to Frances endearingly as Frank. The personal diaries and correspondence of many suffragists reveal intimate same-sex relationships that were romantic or companionship in nature. Scholars have noted the existence of an active Black bisexual network among prominent club women who had husbands but managed to enjoy lesbian relationships as well as social relationships with one another. Medical articles in the late 19th and early 20th century link women's participation in the suffrage movement to what they called repressed homosexuality. Women who challenged the primacy of men, whether by entering the workplace, demanding the vote, or rejecting a man's sexual prerogatives, were often labeled by doctors as biological misfits and inverts. In medical articles of the time, doctors often linked women's political activism to defective sexuality, declaring that if a woman harbored masculine ideas of independence, she likely possessed other manly attributes, such as excessive body hair or liking the taste of cigars. While conceding that not every suffragist was a lesbian, these doctors determined that women's efforts to invade a man's sphere was a clear indication that women activists had a certain compelling force within them. The individuals I've noted here, and countless others, received backlash and criticism for how they lived their lives and how they represented themselves. In 1909, anti-suffragist Bishop William Croswell Doane of Albany, shown here seated, went as far as to call anyone who fell outside of traditional gender norms freaks of nature. Those are strong words leading to strong rhetoric and the classification of deviant sexualities in the 1920s. Looking at historical people through a modern lens can be a challenge. Even while taking notes for this program, I struggled with what pronouns were appropriate or referring to someone by their given name instead of their chosen name, as they aren't here to ask for guidance. Still, there is so much we can learn from them. Those who I have included here are only a small segment of the many individuals who lived outside of the traditional social constructs of their time. We know that all of these individuals lived brave lives, even if it meant their true selves only came out behind closed doors or in journal pages.